where are we going to get these people who are going to take care of the learning needs of every child?
I guess where I would like to start off by is to look at what really influences performance of a child in a classroom. And there are lots of studies that are done and people have tried to look at it. But there are some very basic and very fundamental and very easy things that one can see can happen. So for example, there are studies in psychology which show that if there is one adult in the family, it doesn't matter whether it's a parent or it's an uncle or an aunt or even a friend of the parent who is interested in the education of the child, who simply asks these questions such as, oh, how's your school doing, what's happening, what's not happening, and so on and so forth. If there's one adult in the family or one adult in the person's, in the child's world who is interested in the education of this child, the child does well. Yeah, and it's so, I mean, it looks so simple, but apparently for a lot of children, even that one adult doesn't exist. Nobody asks that kind of question to the child as to what is happening in your class, who's teaching you what is going on, what are you interested in, why don't you like this subject, and so on and so forth. So even this conversation about studying and school and friends and what's happening in the school is a rare conversation. The other study that I thought was very interesting and again very basic was that, and this is actually reported in Stephen Levitt's book on Freakonomics, where he says, you know, they looked at a whole lot of data and they found that the only thing that seemed to make a difference in terms of performance of children was the number of books available in the home. It didn't matter whether whether they were being read out to the kid, whether there was something was done about these, but just if you had an almirah full of books, then you would also have a child who was performing well. Now, I'm sure, I mean, it's an interesting conjecture, but I think what happens is when the printed paper is not used to wrap garbage and throw, but it is used as something that is interesting, looked at, understood, seems to generate conversations, it's something that people talk about, that itself leads to a certain level of understanding, certain level of love, certain level of interest, certain level of curiosity about what is there. And my own experiences, and I've been to a lot of villages and homes in villages and also lower middle class homes in towns, there is not a single book or a magazine in the home. There's not a single book, and you will be surprised. And the fact is that there isn't enough reading material that is even produced. Yeah? There isn't a village level newspaper, there isn't a village level, there aren't books in my language. I'm not going to go and buy a book in English or Hindi if I'm in Orissa or if I'm in Bengal. I will need something that is in my language which I understand, where the story is not that of a blonde girl with blue eyes who goes to picnics and has lemonade. It has to be a story about the context in which I grow up and what is there. And really we don't have that infrastructure. We just don't have that. And this is the kind of infrastructure which may not be all that difficult to create, but it just doesn't exist. And I mean, I can go on. I mean, the Hindi readership has gone down across over the years, and the number of magazines, the number of material that is published in it has gone down. And if this is true for Hindi, you can imagine what happens for many other languages in the country. And therefore, if it is not available and it is not contextual and it's not there, I don't know if putting the child in the school is ever going to lead to education.
Okay.
So what is going to happen with having the child in the school is, it is actually time. Of course, school still serves a purpose. There's a social purpose. There are other kinds of purposes that happens, and that's fine that happens. But at the end of the day, what happens there has no parallel to what happens at home. And if it has no parallel to what happens at home, I don't think we are going to see. We are going to really see inclusion, or we are really going to see the benefits coming out from education. So what I'm saying is, having just a one-pronged approach is not going to provide access, equity and equality in education. It has to be a multi-pronged approach. We are an extremely diverse country. We have extremely diverse set of issues to deal with, which means at different levels, different people have to engage with it. It can't be just the private school, it can't just be the municipal school, it can't just be, so it has to be a different level of engagement, and unless that engagement happens at several levels and inclusion, this is not going to happen. That's my
Okay. So when we're talking about diversity, and we also know that education doesn't just come from books, and in today's time, and we're going to have an example of the Hole in the Wall project, something what you spoke about, having books around the child, and the children getting or gravitating towards the reading. I think something like that they've done with technology, you know. So do you think maybe we could give this a thought as a larger group? Do you think technology could step in to provide access to quality education? I mean, you know, that's something that maybe we could have it as a
no doubt, but that's not the only thing.
Yeah,
Yet.
absolutely.
I think we need many more.
Yeah, yes.
See, the social exclusion studies have been going on for a long time in the field, especially in the field of health. So Scotland was one of the first countries to do social exclusion. I'm sorry to say country. They converted the word to inclusion later. It started off as social exclusion, and then the Scottish group thought that inclusion is a better word. But what I'm trying to get at is we have been trying to measure exclusion or inclusion using different criteria, instruments. And usually we talk about, do you have TV? Because it's exposure to mass media, the larger world. Did you visit a cinema with your family on Sunday? Did you go into the public places, right, in your city? Because if I'm excluded from that, I will not go there. After some time, we gave it some thought, and we said, if we want to act on social inclusion and exclusion, then we need to add something to it. So one of the groups added the word dictionary. Now, do you have a dictionary at home? I mean, it may be the worst book to have, but in terms of operationalizing, is it there or not? Now, our communities are very smart. They said, I understand why you're asking me TV, because it's mass media, I'll know what's going on. You're asking me why I went to public place. What is this dictionary going to do with social exclusion or inclusion? It is going to serve no purpose. So parents don't have an idea that you can actually work with education and improve yourself and get out of the state you're in. I'm not saying necessarily get mainstream, but whatever you want to do, you can do that. That's one thing. And the second observation, again coming from her thing, is that I think parents have outsourced education. So I think we need to include parents in education.
Yeah.
Parents are simply the drivers. Parents are the drivers of children, in the sense of a physical, not the driver of education, but a physical driver. Yeah. Or in the case of a mother, she's just a kind of a guardian who walks along on the road. So parents have outsourced education completely, and that's why the values, which since morning we've been talking about, those values are not there, because the parent doesn't know what is the value of a dictionary, or what is the value of reading a newspaper. Yeah. So
I think I could go a step further and say, why is it that in government schools we don't have accountability of teachers, and why do we still have it in private schools? Is maybe the parents, I mean, in a private school, you know, the school is accountable to the parents. So maybe that's one of the reasons that the standards are met.
In fact, I think there has been, I mean, the whole private is a very good thing. I'm not wanting to take that away. But I think with the opening of the private schools, something else has happened which is not so good in the public sphere. And this was shared by somebody I was speaking to. So in the earlier days, like even 20 years ago, everybody's child went to the same school. And so when the bank clerk's child went to the same school and the teacher's child went to the same school, there was a check and balance on the school. Today, most of those children go to other schools, and there is another population whose children go to the municipal school. And there's nobody to ask questions to the teacher. There's nobody to say, well, you didn't say this, or you said this wrong, or something. So that discourse is completely lost as well. So in fact, the municipal schools have gotten beleaguered. The accountability has gone. The community is not any more interested in it. The only community that goes there is already disempowered. And there's nobody to have that conversation. So in fact, with the opening of the private schools, especially in the smaller towns and the smaller hamlets and so on and so forth, that division has become even more bigger. Yeah? And that's something that I think we all, as people who are in the part of this process, really need to be aware of and see what we've created. Maybe it's a Frankenstein.
Okay, so that's quite an eye opener, because we were thinking that we need more schools, we need more private schools in maybe the interiors and areas where we could provide access to good quality education. But you're saying maybe that's taking away from the accountability of, yes.